by then, and they better listen to him, because he's Mr. AA. This is 9 months. Well, if he lives through that, there's another period which comes at a year. Now, this year period of danger is more applicable to the periodic AA than it is the chronic. Fortunately, I was a chronic AA. I was drunk all the time. I didn't have to suffer through some of these things that the periodics did. I just used to, in the morning, get up and belt away and get it, and I'd get back in the same that I was before, and I didn't have to suffer through all these things that the periodic did. But the periodic at a year, he's never made this year. You see, a year is a time element that has been disastrous to him. It throws rocks in his way. He's signed pledges for a year. He's sworn off for a year. He's signed on New Year's Day. He's going to drink all this year. Then he's been sentenced to a year, and all this year business. You know, it's a time. It's a block in his capacities here. So this monkey's never made this year, and when he does finally make it in AA, sometimes the guy thinks, well, I have arrived. I have something now that never I had before. Something has happened to me. I am okay now. And he can rest back on his oars. This sometimes happens. I don't need so many meetings. I don't have to hang around so many of these jugheads. I don't like to listen to all this yak that they're all going on about how drunk they got all these years. I've heard all the stories. So this all goes through his mind, and he's starting to get busy in other things anyway. He's gotten back to church maybe. He's got a job. He's got a little jingle in a pocket. He's got a new car. He's got a new wife. And everything is going, you know, and he's getting to be a pretty important guy in the community, and he's outgrowing these things, so he's had his year, and he can take things easy now and lead a normal life, you know. I just love to see these poor suckers that try out this normal life business. If you think you're ever going to live a normal life in AA, what is a normal life anyway? You know, a normal life for a rummy is to be drunk. Don't ever forget that when they start talking about normalcy. That's our normal state of affairs. Now, if the rummy lives through this year thing, there's another critical period which comes at 2 years. By this time, things have happened pretty well for him. He's getting settled down pretty well, and he sits down one day and gets thinking about this thing. And all of a sudden, he comes to the conclusion that he don't know a bloody thing about this yet. That, to me, is the beginning of wisdom. This guy knows that he has a long ways to go yet, at 2 years. He's been going to his meetings. He's been working hard. He's been running around helping wherever he could and doing what he could. He's been conscientious. He finds out after 2 years, he's just beginning. He's just getting his feet wet. After 3 years of constant effort and attention and interest and love and study and exercise, just then does the average alcoholic start to get to the place where he can become logical. After 3 years. And this is after a lot of work. Don't ever forget this. I didn't read this in a book. I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of alcoholics come to AA. I know thousands and thousands of them all over the country and elsewhere. And I've seen this experience. I've lived through it. And this is about the way it goes. I'm not talking about you geniuses out here. I'm talking about the average rummy who comes here. They're just a slob like myself. Of course, we get geniuses. But we have to excuse them. Now, we have gone through admission, submission, and restitution. This restitution is tough. We have to go to people. 2 of the roughest restitution jobs I had. One was with my own brother, and the other was with a bartender. And I had to do this, and I'm glad I did. They're both passed away and gone now. And I'm glad I had that chance, but I did it. It was a rough deal, it really was. It wasn't easy. A lot of people I went to and see, they say, okay, you quit drinking, just stay away from me, that's all right. You know, I won't bother you, just don't you bother me. We'll get along, just stay away. A good many of them says, well, that's fine, Clarence, that's swell. Glad to hear it, and good luck. A lot of people told me that. Most of them did. But everyone doesn't accept us. But we have to try this. That's what the program calls for. We have to clean up all this garbage if we can. We have to make the effort and be willing at least. The last phase of our program is a phase of construction. We've had the admission where we know that there's something wrong. We've submitted our will and our lives to the care of God. We've made our restitution. We've cleaned up the past and dropped it. Let the dead past bury its dead, as the good book says. Now we have to construct a life. There's one thing of getting sober. There's a guy who says, that's easy to quit drinking. I quit 1,000 times. Yeah, it is easy to quit. Staying quit is a trick. And here's the way we stay quit, is these last 3 steps. These are the steps I prefer to refer to as the steps of construction. The 10th step, it says we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. Well, that's really a switch for a rummy to ever admit he's wrong. And do it promptly yet. This is something. We've had to grow a lot before we ever get to that 10th step, believe me. So we would never admit anything. We don't even admit it's raining outside. It might involve us in something. Did you ever, I suppose some of you folks have on occasion gone down out of curiosity to a courtroom just to hear cases. You've never been down there as a principal or anything. But we do get down once in a while as our civic duty to find out what's going on. So you see some lush come up there in front of the judge in the morning, and he's all blurry-eyed, and he's shaking, and he's sick, and he's scared, and he's sweating, and he stinks. And he's probably been in a can all night, and he don't look so good anywhere you look at him. And they read off the charge there. The bailiff reads it, and the judge looks at him and says, you were drunk. No. You were drinking. Well, after a lot of haggling around, this guy will finally break down and admit that he had 2 beers. This is the undoing of the drinker, 2 beers. I have never heard of anybody getting in trouble really getting drunk. It's only those guys that had 2 beers. So I would advise anybody to refrain from that. No, we won't admit anything. Never have. But here this 10th step is requiring that every day we take a personal inventory of ourselves. We have to check on ourselves time and again during the day. Why do we do this? And why do we admit promptly when we're wrong? This is the reason for this. It takes us off the defensive. We've been on the defensive all our lives. That's why we've always skirted around. Every time someone asks us a question, we parry it, I can remember when I came into AA, I lay in that hospital in Akron for a week. And every day some of these men came in to see me. They come in and visited me, and everyone told me their story. And everyone told me the same thing before he left. He says he has the answer to my drinking problem. But none of them would tell me what the answer was. They were leaving that up to my sponsor, see? The guy that was going to operate on me. The last day I was in this hospital, Paul Stanley came in. Paul's dead now, Paul and Dick both. And Paul could really talk. Wow. Paul's wife was a Christian Science reader, and Paul had got inoculated with some of this Christian Science. He got it mixed up with Oxford group stuff, and he'd been reading Emmett Fox, and he got into spiritualism, and he got to talking to me. He came in, I'm in the bed. I might say I weighed 130 pounds when I was in that hospital, so I was pretty sick. I hadn't eaten for a long time. And this is the last day I'm in the hospital. I'd been in there about a week, I guess. And Paul came in at breakfast time. He came in early. Didn't have anything else to do. And he ate my breakfast for me. Good fellow. Paul was still talking to me at lunchtime. You fellas in Cleveland and all you people know about this hospitalization they do up in that part of the country. And a lot of people around here do the same, I guess. So Paul was in there at lunchtime, and he ate my lunch for me. I got the dessert. But the point is, I wasn't even eaten yet. I was in there a week and I hadn't started to eat, so you can imagine how shape I was in. And he's still talking to me, and I'm still, Well, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Doc came in, and Paul left. He missed my supper. So Doc came in, and he sat on the foot of the bed. It was a very unprofessional posture. And he looks at me. And many of you folks who knew Doc, and a good many of you here I know have had the pleasure of meeting him before he died. Doc was a tall, angular fella, and he had fingers on him about this long. And Doc sat there a minute, he looked at me, he says, "Well, young fellow," he says, "what do you think of all this by now?" I says, "Well, I think this is fine. All these fellas coming in talking to me, I don't know any of them from a load of hay, but they're all telling me there's what happened to them, and they're all so good to me." And I says, "It's wonderful. I think it's great." I says, "But there's one thing that gets me." He says, "Well, what's that?" I says, "These fellas all keep telling me that they have the answer to my problem, but they won't tell me what this is." I says, "Just what is this answer? What's the secret? What do I have to do? What are you going to do to me?" So I'll never forget this. He looks at me and he says, "Well, young fella," he says, "we don't know about you. We don't know if you're ready yet. 130 pounds, I'm on the bum, I don't have any place to go, I'm broke, I don't know where I'm going when I leave that hospital. And I don't know if I'm ready." I often contrast that with the idea of the way we kiss some of these monkeys nowadays. Oh, come on. I had to fight my way into this deal, really. So what's to get ready? I had to convince him I was ready for this. Finally, I guess I did, because he says, "Okay," he says, "I'll give you the answer to this whole thing." He turns to me then with his long bony finger and he points it at me. And he says, "Young fella," he says, "do you believe in God?" Well, boy, this really shook me. Because this is the last thing I ever expected to hear from a doctor. I expected something quite different, as I explained before. So this shook me up, and of course, being a rummy, I can't answer a question like that without parrying, you know. So I look back at him, I'm amazed, of course, and I says, "Well, what does that have to do with it?" He says, "Young fella, that has everything to do with it. Do you or don't you?" This is giving you the spiritual foundation and with a silk glove, I guess, huh? With a hammer. So I'm flabbergasted. I don't want to answer this because things went through this blubber of mine. I thought, holy smokes, I'm in this hospital and obligated to a bunch of religious nuts. See, the last thing I want to get tangled up with. So he's waiting for an answer. Do I or don't I? So I says, "Well, I guess I do." He says, "There's no guessing about it. You do or you don't." Well, I'm stuck. Where can I go? So I said, "Okay, I believe in God. Yes, I do." He says, "Fine." He says, "Now we can get someplace." I thought, oh boy, we're going to get someplace. He says, "Get out of there and get on your knees." So he bounces me out of that bed and I get on my knees. He says, "We're going to pray." I said, "Who's going to pray?" He says, "You're going to pray." I says, "I don't know anything about praying." He says, "I don't expect you do, but he says, I'll utter a prayer and you can repeat it and that'll do for this time." So he got me down there on my bones in that hospital room, and he uttered a prayer, and I followed him. I felt foolish, of course. Naturally, I felt like a fish. But it didn't kill me. As you see, I am here. And after we concluded, he shook my hand. He says, "Young fellow, you're going to be all right." And that night he carried me off to a meeting, and that was my beginning. I just wanted to mention that because it ties in here about what this program is and about this changing of our lives. This next step, this